Hello. If you're struggling with posting a body to a REST data source in Oracle Apex, I'm here to try to help you out with this. So, me and my colleagues struggled with this for about a week before we finally figured it out. It's not very straightforward in the documentation. It is not very straightforward in the app itself when building the Apex app. And so, in order to not have anybody else suffer, we're going to try to run through it quickly right here. I'm going to go as quick as possible, as painless as possible. If you follow it step by step exactly, I guarantee you will get your REST data source to work for a post and be able to successfully post variables to your body. So, here we go. So, first, I'm using the restful-api.dev. It's just to test a site where you can, shout out to them. They make this great thing where you can just do test posts and you get a response. So that's what we'll be using for this demo. And we'll be in Apex 24.1. And here is Postman. So first things first, if your API, if you cannot get it to work in Postman or Insomnia, whichever you prefer, don't even try to start doing it in RESTful services in Apex, because Postman is very simple. If you can't figure it out here, you're gonna have a lot of trouble in REST services. So we're gonna pretend like you already are familiar with REST services and you're familiar with Apex somewhat, and we're gonna go from here. So I have the URL from that website we showed you earlier, api.restful-api.dev. And I put some body in here. The cool part about it is when I post this body, it's basically going to return the same body with an identifier. Basically, is the only change. So, and here's my response. All right, so now that I know for sure that it works in Postman, we're going to go over to Apex and in shared components in our app. So we have our app here, right? So once you're in your app, go to shared components. In the bottom left, see REST data sources. Click it. And we're going to create a new source. Now, please follow this carefully because the little wizard that's supposed to walk you through, you have to finagle it. It's not, I have a lot to say about this, but just follow me here. So we'll do from scratch. Next. Name it whatever. Right, so I think I had already made up a fake name. Let's see. REST test. Alright, so we're going to call it REST test. URL endpoint. This is where you're going to grab your endpoint from Postman. Same endpoint you used in Postman. Okay. Paste that. Next. And it found the service URL for me, so we're good. Next. Pagination, nothing for this. Authentication, so this API is open. There's no authentication required since it's just a test API, but if you want to add authentication, you can. Just check it off and choose your type and fill it out accordingly, but this is open, so we're going to just leave it off. And before you hit discover, this is very important. I cannot stress this enough. If you just hit discover, it's not going to work. I do not know why. You don't have to click manually, but click on advanced right here in the middle, in the bottom right. When you click on advanced, you're going to want to tell it if you're trying to post, right? Gets are pretty easy in here, but posts are not. Right, so we want to post. So we have to tell it right here we want to post. Okay? And for request body, you can give it a sample request body. Just copy your request body from Postman. Okay? This can be changed later, but if you don't define it, from my experience, if you don't define it right here when you're creating the REST data source, it just does not work. So we're just going to put the request body in here, a little sample, and we're using JSON. So a lot of API endpoints, if you don't tell it the content type that you're passing to it, it won't accept it. So you'll get very far in this, almost all the way done, and it still won't work. And after hours of troubleshooting, you'll find out it's just because you did not define a content type in your header, right? So here, choose parameter type header, HTTP header, and we're going to copy it exactly from Postman. Postman did this for us, right? It just figured it out, and I wish Apex was the same, but it's not. So we have to tell it content type. Application JSON. And for this endpoint, it's always going to be JSON. So I'm just going to say it's static. It's always going to send that. Okay. And for discovery sample, provide this too. Please provide this. If you do not provide the sample, I don't know, even if you go in later after you've created it and try to add a sample, it just doesn't work. It seems like a bug to me. So just provide one here while you're still in here. And this is basically with the response, what you're expecting the response to look like. So go copy your response from Postman that you got, and we'll just save it in a random notepad file. Okay. Fake response. All right. And now we'll choose our file from our file system. Fake response. Here we go. And now it knows what the response is about to look like. Now, there are two, and this what I'm about to say is mainly for Oracle if they ever see this. So if you want to be able to capture the response, and if you want to be able to send variables to your body, your request body, you have to define the parameters. But when you're setting it up in the wizard for the first time, request a response body type is not an option. It just does not show up, which is, it's crazy to me because obviously I'm defining what I want the body to look like and what I want the response to look like. So obviously, yes, I want to send a body and I want to receive a response, but it's not like you do in the wizard. So just keep going. Discover. Boom. So I get back basically my sample. If you don't see this, rewind the video and start over. If you don't see this, you're not going to get anywhere. Let's create. Now I have my REST data source right here. So I'm going to go into it. And the first thing you want to do, if you want to be able to read the response, which of course you are going to want the response, you're going to have to go tell it down here. Add a parameter after the fact. This is what's not in the wizard. I don't know why. So let's add a parameter. And here, now all of a sudden, we can see request or response body. Choose that as the type. Name it whatever you want. I like to always name it response. So it's always the same, but I don't have to worry about it. And this is out. This is what I want to get in return. I'm not passing it in, I want to read it out. I'll name it response, and I'll add that parameter. Okay, so I have my content type header, that's static, and now I have a response where it will put the response in for me to read. Okay, but we're not done. So if you scroll up under operations, you see we have the post operation. Edit it. Now, there's more parameters in here. Why there's two areas of parameters, I'm unsure, but I've only been able to get it to work when adding my input parameters that I want to pass into my body in this section. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to pass in a variable to, instead of hello, I wanted to pass in some kind of variable, right? And what did I name it in my little test? I named it a random name. Okay, so to do this, we'll do hash random. I'll do it lower to keep it the same. Random name hash. Okay. And here's where it gets even a little crazier. If the API you're calling is expecting a number, the input type is a number, and when you call it from Postman, right, in your body in Postman, if it's not wrapped in double quotes, it's like this because it's a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, then in your REST data source, do not wrap it in double quotes. But if it's not a number, you have to wrap it in double quotes right here. Even though you put your little hash variable, you still have to wrap it in double quotes. If you do not wrap it in double quotes, it will not work. You will get a 400 every time. So wrap it in double quotes, hash, random name, hash. That's the name I want for my my little variable, my input variable. So if I hit synchronize with body, okay, it will make my parameter for me. Boom, here it is. I could have done it manually. I could have gone click add parameter, added the parameter, and then matched the name exactly in here. But we just went ahead and put the variable name we wanted and clicked synchronize with body, and here it created our parameter for us, our input parameter. Okay. And just for the testing sake, I'm going to put a default value of test. Your default value, as long as whenever you go to call it from your application itself, if you do not pass in a value for your random name parameter, it's going to just use the default. But if you do pass something in, it will not use the default. It will use what you passed in. I'm only setting a default variable here. That way when we go run the test, it'll work, right? So let's hit apply changes. And we'll scroll down, right? And here's my operation, my post. Let's test it. Play. Boom. And I get a response. And look, there's my input. I said test, right? And it responded test. So it's working. If you go to run your operation like I just did, if you go to run this test operation and you get a 400 or you do not get a response, it will not work in the application. So rewind the video again, start over, and create a whole new data source until you get this right. If you're watching this and you already have a data source defined that you're editing to try to get it to work, for some reason, if you don't follow those steps that I showed you upon initial creation, it won't work. Even if you go back and edit it like I just showed you, it just seems to not work. Maybe it's something I'm doing wrong, but my suggestion would be to start over, create a new REST data source, just start from scratch. Anyway, we have our source created here. Let's go back to the app and let's call the source from a page. So we have just a simple home page that doesn't really have anything. I just added a response text area and a button that I'm going to use to call the API. Okay. So here I have a response text area I added and a call API button. Now my button right now, it defaults to submit page. We're going to change it to defined by dynamic action. And now we'll add a dynamic action to it. Right, we'll name it call API. Okay. And on the true value, we're going to have it execute server-side code. Okay. PLSQL is fine. And in here, so I have this little snippet. I'll put the snippet in the description of the video so you can copy and paste. But this is the Apex procedures to write parameters to a data source and then to execute the data source from a dynamic action, and also to read your response parameter. This again isn't really defined very well in the documentation. All the videos you watch, you're going to see them using like a classic report or interactive grid to get REST data source responses. No one really shows you how to do it from a dynamic action, so we're going to do it here. So we named our variable random name. Okay, and I'm just going to set it to, here you go. And that's going to be my input variable for my body that we did earlier with the hash values. So, right, so I have to define response. I'm doing it as a CLOB. Parameters, we set it to apexexec.t parameters. And the REST static ID is the ID of your data source, right? And I'll show you how to find that in a second. So also it's P1 response that I want to set to the response. And I'll go over this one more time. We're defining our response variable, we're defining our parameter variable, and we're defining our REST source, our REST data source identifier. Boom. Now I'm calling this apexexec.add parameter with our L parameters input, the name of the variable I want to set, and the value I want to set it to. The name of the parameter I want to set and the value I want to set it to. And then right here, apexexec.execute REST data source, we're calling, right? I set my static identifier, my data source up here. We're calling that data source. And this is a get. I want to do a post. And I'm passing in my L parameters that I just set right here. Okay. Now in my response, to get your response, we're going to do apexexec.getParameter CLOB, and we're going to pass in all of our parameters, and we're going to say the name of the parameter that we want to get. So if you remembered, we also added an output parameter that we named response. You can name it whatever. Just make sure that your name matches what you named it. But I always name it response, so it's always the same. Now, to get your static ID, I forgot to show you that earlier. Let's go see. Just go back to the app, shared components, REST data sources, and scroll down to the bottom. You'll see advanced. It gives you the static ID. REST test is our static ID of that data source. So for funsies, we'll go double check that that's right. REST test. Okay, good. So REST test, I'm setting the parameter in my body of random name equal to here you go. I'm doing a post, passing in the params, and then I'm calling this to read the response. And then this at the bottom, I'm just setting that text area we defined equal to the response, so we can see that we are getting the response. And hopefully this works on the first try. It usually never does, but let's see. Well, sometimes I have to refresh the page. Let's relaunch the page here. Boom. So here is my response. It works because we called it and it populated it, but it didn't show it on the front end. So let's return. We'll set the items to return p response since we set it in there. Okay, and hopefully now it works when I push the button. So I'll empty this out so we can see. Call API. Boom, here you go. There's my response. It worked. First try. That's crazy. So my only mistake right here was that in items to return, I didn't, even though I'm explicitly setting P1 response equal to the response, it did set it in the background. It just doesn't show it on the UI. So in items to return, we went ahead and chose our item that we wanted to see it, so it would show for the user. And I'll show that. I'll show this one more time. So we'll empty this out. We'll even put some junk here, junk, to show you that it does in fact override it with the response. Call API. Boom, and here's our response. Now, when you want to read through your response, right? If you want to do something where you can set this to a hidden page item and turn the protection off, so you can change it when you call your API, and then you can do a select statement on change and read through a JSON table to read your response into like multiple page item variables. If you want to see a video of me showing you how to do that, just comment and I'll do it. But for now, this should help you out. And if you don't believe me that we're actually passing in a variable, so let's add another variable on the page, and we'll just call it we'll call it there we go, come on, test input. Okay, so if you want to see that we actually are posting variable data to the source, we'll go ahead and change in here. I kind of just hard-coded something, a value, to write to that variable we defined. I'll change it to the page item. P1 test input. And we'll validate and say okay, and we'll save that. Now I'll run the page. And here's our test input. So you see how it said here you go before? Now it should say whatever we say right here. Test pass please God. Call API. And where is it? Oh, I know why. Sorry. Rookie mistake. Now that I didn't hard code the I changed this from hard coding to be a page item to P1 test input. Just like how we have to return an item, I have to tell this PL/SQL block that I want to submit that page item to it. So a lot of times when you type in a page item, it'll just kind of hold it in memory. It won't actually set the page item behind the scenes to that value. So if you want to use a page item that you set in your PL/SQL block, you have to define an items to submit to that block. So since we're using the page item P1 test input, we submitted it to the page. Now I'll try again. Okay. Please work a second time. Call the API. Boom! And here's your proof. Please work second time. It did post it to my REST data source, and super proof. We'll call it again. Boom, super proof. Here's my response, and it did in fact post it, and it replied. So there you go. I hope that helped. Like I said, I put the code that you can do in a PL/SQL block to execute, add body parameters and execute the REST data source from a dynamic action. I put that in the description of this video, so you can copy and paste it. And I hope this helped, because it really frustrated me and my colleagues for quite some time. And so I'm just putting this out there to help everybody else out. So anyway, thanks everyone.